You probably know that you can teach yourself to be great. You can teach yourself to play piano, you can teach yourself to be disciplined, you can teach yourself to be humble, you can teach yourself to trust people more, or to maybe trust people a bit less. Anything in life you basically teach yourself and you learn to do. So why do you think that being lazy and undisciplined is excluded from that conversation? So I was recently talking with my dad about this actually, and he made this point really clear, and this is so amazing because I've never heard this point of view ever in my life, about how you teach yourself ultimately to be lazy. And most of us absolutely master the art of being lazy and undisciplined and unmotivated to do things. So just because it's easy, that's why we teach ourselves it so quickly. Some people grow up in more of a disciplined house where you have got a routine and you have got to stay disciplined. Some of us grew up in a house that is more so a bit less disciplined, you know, like basically what typically occurs, not so disciplined. Or some houses that like are, you know, out of this whole thing. But or some households which are a bit excluded from this conversation. But the reason why you have mastered the art of being lazy is because it's so easy to do. It's easy, and that's why. You can teach yourself to love the easy things, or you can teach yourself to love the hard things. But most of us, from a very young age, get taught to love the easy things, which just draws us into laziness. So don't think that you are just a lazy person. You have been taught to be lazy. You have either been taught to be lazy by your parents, your teachers, yourself. So when it comes to you going from lazy and unmotivated to extremely disciplined and consistent, it just takes you to learn how to do this. And you have got to put in 100% of your efforts to actually go through with it. But you've also got to teach yourself to... The water's going off. So you've got to teach yourself to, first of all, to learn and to be open to learning something new, because some of us just go in trying to learn without being open to actually learning something. We just kind of force it onto ourselves. But if you force yourself into something and there is nothing deeper behind it, you're going to find yourself having a very hard time. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but you're going to have a very hard time being consistent with it. So you've got to, first of all, find a deeper purpose within it. And sometimes you just got to understand that this is just for the best and I will feel better about this. It can be as simple as that. Some of us like to, everyone actually, likes to overcomplicate everything, when some answers are just as simple as they are. And we've got to stop overanalyzing every little thing that happens in our lives, thinking that this is not too confusing. And why isn't it too confusing? Okay, I don't find this confusing, there must be something wrong. But anyway, so you have got to teach yourself to just be open and ready to learn new things and understand that this will be difficult. You've got to be very understanding and you've got to really acknowledge the fact that it will be hard. But that's why you are lazy. You have mastered being lazy, but you can, and don't think you can't, change into being the most productive person you know. From lazy to productive. You can absolutely do that. You've just got to teach yourself to be productive. You've got to learn to be productive because you taught yourself and you learned how to be lazy. So it's not that you are lazy just like that. You just learned how to be lazy. So it's not like you can't change it. You can. You've just got to not unlearn, but learn to be different than what you are. So laziness is a bit like, I would say an illusion, but I don't think that's the right term. I don't know why we think of these bad traits of ours, like unproductive, inconsistent, lazy, and we look at it as if we were born with that, and that's the way life just is, and that it will be the hardest thing ever to get out of that. Like, that's just who I am, and that's just always who I go back to. Like, no, you just go back to what's comfortable and what you learned. Like, let's say that you learn how to ride a 4-wheel bike, and you find that very comfortable because you know how to ride a 4-wheel bike. You've got your supporting wheels, and it's a lot more comfortable to do that. You don't really have to worry about keeping it balanced. But when you go and get on a 2-wheel bike and you learn to drive a 2-wheel bike and you go through the roads and you fail and you fall and everything, you want to go back to what's comfortable. You're on this 2-wheel bike and it's very uncomfortable for you. Like, you have to now learn how to first be stable and balanced and how to ride it at the same time. So it's very hard. So it's very uncomfortable going from something that's comfortable and stable to something that's very uncomfortable and not stable, and you're basically in control of if you fall or not. And you've just got to feel it. But so you fall once, twice, 3 times, and you really want to go back to what's comfortable. So you want to go back to the 4-wheel bike. So you go back on it and you keep riding this 4-wheel bike, and then you're like, look, and you're like, I really should start riding a 2-wheel bike. And you go back on that 2-wheel bike and you ride that 2-wheel bike. And then you fall again and you realize that there is nothing that you really learned. So you, after like 3 days of being consistent, you go back to that 4-wheel bike. It's not that you are destined to have that 4-wheel bike, and you are also not destined to have the 2-wheel bike. But you go back to what is comfortable and what you know. And you don't bother staying consistent with what you don't know. And this is what I mean. It's not that you're lazy. You just go back to what you learned and what you know. And you're afraid of learning the new and being uncomfortable with the new. And with the fact that you will fail. You will fall. But you have to keep going back to the new and not back to the old. Not back to that 4-wheel bike that you know how to drive and steer, and you know how it works and it's comfortable and it's unstable and it's what you know how to, like, you learned how to do it. But now you have to learn how to do this one, the 2-wheel bike. You can't keep going back to what you have learned previously. You've got to take the knowledge you had learned and transfer it over to this. Or if the knowledge is not, like in this case, in the bike case, it's not necessary, you just leave it and you learn. This is what I mean, like that analogy of the 2 and a 4-wheel bike. You learned how to be lazy, and that's why you keep going back to it. It's not because you're a lazy person. It's because it's comfortable, it's what you know, it's what you learned. And the human brain also is just designed for comfort. Like, it just wants comfort all the time. So don't go back to what you know and what you learned previously and what you taught yourself, which is to be lazy. And riding that 4-wheel bike, go to the new and ride that 2-wheel bike, which is just as hard, which is really hard actually, but you will do it in a set amount of time. So you've got to learn how to not be lazy. By that, I mean learn how to be productive, consistent, whatever word you want to insert here. You taught yourself to be lazy, so you can teach yourself to be everything else.